Hi everybody, welcome back, glad you could tune in again. So let's carry on thinking a little bit about the Trinity, and in particular, today I want to focus on some ways in which we could get this teaching wrong. How is it that we could misunderstand what it means for our one God to be three persons, Father, Son and Holy Spirit? There are some illustrations doing the rounds. They've been around for many years, many decades, and some have been around for a lot longer, which purport to clarify our understanding of what it means for our one God to be three persons. But unfortunately, they don't do that. Unlike the illustrations that we've talked about already, they actually distort or create misunderstandings about the triune God. And it's actually kind of helpful for us to know what these misunderstandings are and to see what's wrong with these illustrations, because it sharpens and focuses our understanding of the truth of the triune God's life, so that we can understand him more fully and clearly. So without further ado, let's pitch in and look at some of these illustrations and try and figure out what's wrong with them. Here's the first one. You've probably heard the triune God compared to ice, water and steam. The way that the illustration is supposed to work is something like this. Ice, water and steam are one thing, just like God is one God. And yet, of course, there are three things there, and especially if they exist at the so-called triple point, the combination of pressure and temperature when all three are in equilibrium, it's possible for them to change into each other without any change in internal energy. And that's supposed to be a little bit like the threeness of God. You've got these three things, ice, water and steam, which are all one thing, all chemically the same. So that's, we're told, a good illustration of what it means for God to be one God. Well, what's wrong with that? Well, one clue is in the description I just gave you. You probably spotted it already. We don't really want a doctrine of the Trinity in which one of the persons can turn into another one of the persons, like steam can turn into water when it condenses or into ice when it freezes. The Father doesn't turn into the Son. The Spirit doesn't turn into the Father. The persons are relationally distinct and have their own integrity as persons. They don't turn into each other. So that illustration falls apart immediately at that point. But there's another and perhaps more subtle problem with it. Actually, this illustration is a form of modalism. Modalism is an ancient Trinitarian heresy which expresses the view that God is an undifferentiated single being with no personal distinction within him. The three so-called persons are in fact simply perspectives on or faces of this one divine being. Those faces might show themselves at different times in history, and so sometimes people express a form of modalism when they talk about a certain era of church history being the age of the Father, and then a certain era being the age of the Son, and we're now in the age of the Spirit. That's heading in the direction of modalism if it's conceived that this one God simply makes himself apparent in these different ways, in these different eras. No, we want a view of God in which the different persons have the capacity to relate to each other. They can and do, so to speak, coexist and co-relate to each other. They're not different masks that God can put on at different times to reveal just a single divine person. There are other illustrations which have much the same effect. A common one is to say, well, how about me as an illustration of the Trinity? This is going to go wrong already, you can see. I am simultaneously a brother and a husband and a father. There you are, one man, three relationships in which I exist. And of course the problem with that is that I'm not three different relationally integrated persons. I'm one person, and to talk of me as a brother and a husband and a father is just three different ways of looking at the one me. The more recent 3-in-1 shampoo, conditioner and body wash falls victim to the same problem. This is just one mixture of substances which does three jobs. It's not got any kind of relational integrity, relational distinction within it. So there's a bunch of modalist illustrations which all fall apart in roughly the same way. How about another set of illustrations? You may have heard the triune God compared to an egg. It's not an attempt to be irreverent, it's just an attempt to articulate how one thing, an egg, can be three things as well. It's a shell, it's got the white stuff in it, and then it's got the yolk in it. So the one is also three. The one God is also three persons. Well, this is wrong for a different reason. In this case, you've got the yolk and the white stuff and the shell all existing at the same time, and they're distinct from each other, unlike with ice, water, steam, when you have it flitting between the three different things. But here the problem is, how much of the yolk, say, dwells within the white of the egg? How much of the white is in the yolk? How much of the shell is in the yolk? The answer is, of course, none. You could separate them out, and indeed when you're cooking, that's what you do. You crack the egg, get rid of the shell, you've got the shell here, and then you put the egg in like a little egg cup or something, and then you need the white to whip up something else. You can separate these three things out. You don't actually have one thing in any meaningful sense at all. You've got three things. And so this actually is a form of tritheism, three gods-ism. If you say that God is like an egg, really what you're going to have to do at some point is either to admit you've got three distinct and separate things and three gods, or what you're going to end up doing is saying, well, faced with that unnerving prospect, we'll put a star next to one of them, he can be the real God, and then you've got two subordinate gods, and that doesn't give you tritheism, it gives you one God, but it doesn't give you Trinitarian monotheism, because this one God is now just a one thing with no relational distinction in him. So the egg falls apart for that reason. It's either tritheist or it ends up back at non-Trinitarian monotheism. The illustration of the shamrock, that little three-leafed plant, also is the same thing. You've got three leaves, and this leaf is just different from this leaf and really has no connection to it. So there's a cluster of illustrations that go wrong for a different reason. One more set for you. You may have heard the triune God compared to the sun. The sun, the big orange star in the sky, sends out both light and heat. So you've got the sun itself, and then you've got light and heat, which are, so to speak, produced by the sun and connected with the sun. And so here you've got the one thing, the bright hot sun, within which description you can distinguish three things: the sun, the brightness of the light, and the heat that it produces. Well, what's wrong with this? This is probably, if it's understood in the way that I think it would be understood, a form of what is known as Arianism. This is another ancient heresy with which the Church Fathers did battle in the first few centuries of the Church. According to Arianism, only the Father is truly and properly God. The Son, and in fact the Spirit, although Arians didn't tend to talk so much about the Spirit, the debate was really about the Father and the Son. The Son is created by God. He's a creature, not one with God, the Creator. This actually is the view of modern Jehovah's Witnesses. Jehovah's Witness theology and Christology is technically Arian theology and Christology. They don't believe in the full divinity of God the Son. The Son is a subordinate being. He comes from God, rather like the light and the heat come from the sun in that illustration. You can see why that illustration actually serves as an illustration of Arianism, because, just to put it simply, the heat that we feel from the sun is not the sun itself. Whereas in Christian, Orthodox, classical, biblical Trinitarian theology, the Son and the Spirit are both fully God and possess everything that it is and means to be God. So there are three little illustrations which show us how, sets of illustrations which show us how we could go wrong. In tomorrow's devotion, I'm actually going to raise one or two more illustrations which go wrong in more subtle ways and which might be harder for us to spot. and might even, if we're not careful, be more likely to influence our thinking in unhelpful ways. But I'll save that for tomorrow. For now, the Lord bless you, and I hope very much to see you soon. Bye for now.